Good evening, and thank you for viewing the second Arcata City Council Budget Study Session. As you know, the City Council meeting is being held as a teleconference in response to local efforts to reduce the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We again want to thank the community for their efforts to practice social distancing, for wearing masks in public places, and having patience to safely access local businesses as restrictions are lifted. As a reminder, all votes will be taken through a roll call vote. Public comment was accepted via email and in writing. Comments will be read by staff during the public comment agenda item. You can email public comments to pc@cityofarcata.org now if you want them to be read and be recorded as part of this meeting. First, could we have a roll call, please, Karen?
Mayor Winkler?
Here.
Vice Mayor Patino?
Here.
Councilmember Watson?
Here.
Councilmember Pereira?
Here.
All present.
Right. May I have a staff report from the city manager, Karen Deemer, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go ahead and share a screen that we are on Zoom with, just as a budget overview. So this is our second budget overview, budget study session for the City Council. And at the first meeting, let's see how this is going to work. During the last meeting, we reviewed sort of the budget principles. We talked through some of the state sales tax deferral programs that are being offered currently, and then we high level reviewed sort of major expenditure increases that would be prevalent in the 2021 fiscal year budget, and then additional revenue decreases as a result of the coronavirus pandemic emergency that we're managing currently. Based on that conversation, the council directed staff to go back and develop 3 alternatives. And those 3 alternatives really were around the concept of a shelter-in-place order. So whether the shelter-in-place order itself is still active during those periods, or whether or not just basically the consumer practice still has not returned to sort of near normal levels or trending into normal levels. These 3 options were to provide some revenue estimates based on what the impacts of those options might be. So the first one was a shelter-in-place order, or basically an economic equivalent of July 1st. The second one was a shelter-in-place order, or again, sort of economic reaction to shelter-in-place order through October 1st of 2020. And the third then was an option that in essence had the shelter-in-place order through January 1st of 2021. So starting with sort of best case scenario of July 1st through worst case scenario of January 1st, 2021. So I just wanted to start by acknowledging that, there are just tremendous challenges that individuals, businesses, and certainly Arcata's economy as a whole are experiencing right now. All of the budget options that we are going to review tonight reflect very significant reductions to all of our funds and our service levels. As perspective, I went back and looked at, our best case scenario, option 1 budget for tonight equates basically to the same general fund budget that we had 10 years ago in 2010, 2011. So I was not going to go over sort of the basics that we provided at the last meeting, but jump right into the revenue estimates that we have developed based on those 3 options that were outlined by the council. So the first 2 pieces of that are sales tax and transaction and use tax. And sales, those are the 2 largest sources of general fund revenues. They make up approximately 27% of the fund. And you'll see when we get into the projections that there's 2 estimates. The first is provided from the city's long-term sales tax consultant, HDL. And they had an initial budget estimate that they provided that was shared with the council at the last meeting. We have gone back and requested additional options that they've developed specifically for tonight. And they are around your option 1 shelter in place July 1st and your option 2 shelter in place of October 1st. And they take into consideration that HSU would be 100% virtual for the first semester of next school year. So those 2 options were not incorporated in the initial assessment that HDL provided the city. You're also going to see city estimates. So city staff has prepared estimates that really do consider some additional closures and some deeper impacts to the community spending power if HSU is on virtual or near virtual mode. So the city estimates show larger decreases in sales tax and TUT than HDL's estimates provided. We also have had other data points that have come out in the last 2 weeks since our previous budget study session, including the California May revised budget from the governor's office, predicting a 27% decrease in sales tax. Humboldt County has released their preliminary budget, and they are estimating 19% decrease in sales tax, and then a 14% reduction in what we refer to as Measure Z, which is in essence a transaction and use tax for the county, similar to the city's Measure G, transaction and use tax for Arcata. We are still estimating that 100% of the businesses that are eligible for sales tax deferrals and the one-year payment plans will exercise that option. And we did some consultation with REDEC, which is the city's JPA, the regional JPA around economic development. So I'm happy to stop also and take some quick questions, or I'm just going to keep jumping into our sales tax and the TUT estimates, unless I hear otherwise. Okay. So looking at, again, option 1, July 1st shelter in place. Option 2 is typically going to be in the kind of a yellow color, October 1st shelter in place. And then option 3, reflected for some anyway in red, is a January 1st, 2021 shelter in place. All of these predictions are assuming HSU will be 100% virtual. For reference, you will always see the 1920 fiscal year. What we expect to bring in this fiscal year that we're ending right now. So for option 1, just to take you through 1920, we predict 2.67 million in sales tax. The HDL estimate has a reduction of 18%, or about 2.1 million in sales tax coming into the city next fiscal year. Your staff current estimate from the city staff is a minus 29% for option 1. So and then for option 2, October 1st, obviously it's going to all be the same for 1920. The HDL estimate is a minus 30% or a 30% decrease in sales tax with a shelter in place or the effects of shelter in place through October 1st. And your city staff estimate is a reduction of 45% for an October 1st shelter in place. We did not ask HDL to do option 3. At that point, I don't think they were necessarily comfortable looking that far out, understanding how that would play out, but felt pretty comfortable about the first 2 options. Your city staff estimate for that third option is a 60% reduction in sales tax. On the transaction and use tax, so on our local sales tax at point of sale here in Arcata, HDL on a whole, and they provide services for a good percentage of the cities in the state of California. And so looking through those, I definitely saw a trend that they felt like the local sales tax at point of sale typically were affected slightly less than the overall sales tax estimates. That has held true for the estimates they provided for the city of Arcata as well. Our TUT this year was 2.18 million. HDL's estimate is for option 1 is a reduction of 15%. The city staff current estimate is a reduction of 29%. So the staff estimates have held between sales tax and TUT, while you'll find that HDL is just slightly less in their reductions for the TUT tax. Option 2, the October shelter in place, has from HDL a reduction of 27% and your current staff estimate at a reduction of 45%. And then again on option 3, coming down to 60% on the staff estimate. Really looking at taking sales tax at that point, or the TUT, from 2.18 million all the way down to 872,000. Transient occupancy tax or hotel tax, we looked at a little different projection for this. So we've looked at, during the shelter in place period, a 90% reduction in TOT. And for that 6 months following, as the economy starts to rebuild, we've estimated a 50% reduction in TOT. And then if there is a remainder, depending on the shelter in place order period of the fiscal year after that 6 months, a 25% reduction in TOT, again, as the economy is ramping back up. Staff has queried hotels throughout Arcata for both April and May to try to capture, at least anecdotally, the experience on the ground during the current shelter in place period. And both of those estimates have indicated that the formulas that we've created are conservative. All the hotels have reported a little higher occupancy than is being reflected, at least in the 90% reduction, since we're still in shelter in place. And that trend we will just continue to track. And as you might recall, the council has also agreed to review the financials monthly as we enter into this fiscal year so that we can track those trends as well. So, but with this set of assumptions, option 1, the July 1st shelter in place, we would see a reduction of 38% in TOT this coming fiscal year. Option 2, at October 1st, we'd see a 54% reduction in TOT. And option 3, a 70% reduction in TOT. So a pretty dramatic reduction, starting at 1.6 million this year, down to $1 million for option 1, $740,000 option 2, down to $480,000 in revenues for option 3. High level, we've obviously had to make considerable budget reductions to start to plan for any one of these options. So all of the current budget planning includes the freezing of 10 either currently vacant or anticipated vacancies, or positions where we can move staff around and into alternative full-time positions to free up particular positions that have general fund associated with them that would need to be vacated. It freezes all new vehicle purchases for 2021, eliminates training and travel, except where we have some state required licensing or some grant funds to support that training. It defers capital projects that require a general fund allocation. And when we get into preparing the final initial budget, we will go through, you will still see quite a few projects. Arcata has been very successful in receiving grants, state and federal grants, for critical infrastructure projects, for environmental enhancement projects, for parks and recreation projects. And so we do still have quite a few grants that will produce some fun projects for the 2021 budget year. And we can talk through those in your packet. We've provided a list of all the capital projects and then the reductions that were being considered at each of the 3 alternatives. And you'll see for most of those projects, you don't see significant reductions because they are grant funded, or they're within the water and sewer funds, you know, being funded by funding streams that we've developed associated with the rate structure that we're talking and working our way through now. And it should be noted that in this fiscal year, the city did pull back on current paving contracts, either negotiating reductions or the one bid we canceled completely, and will be bringing back a revised bid for the council's consideration at the reduced level, basically removing general fund contributions to those projects for this fiscal year as well. All options reduce a majority of our part-time personnel, and then really reduces materials and services to bare levels, again, reverting this budget back almost 10 years for the city of Arcata. So this slide really is the summary, and the hope is to get from the council direction on which financial revenue estimate to be building the initial budget, recognizing that we are going to need to continue to be nimble, that the development of our 3 options allows us to continue to make deeper cuts, as you know, as are indicated by the actual sales tax and TOT dollars that we see coming in as we move into the next fiscal year. But we do need to land on an option that we can start to finalize that initial budget presentation for the council. So the revenue estimate here, again, for total general fund for 1920 is just about 14.5 million. Option 1 reduces about $3 million in projects and program and staffing costs. Option 2 takes out, another 1.6 million, and then yet another 1.2 million or so reduction above and beyond that. So with all of, at this point, the reductions that we've been able to make in the budget, option 1 right now is still 653,000 in a general fund deficit. So if we had to close that gap immediately, that would require 8 additional positions to be laid off citywide. And we'll talk about options other than layoffs that we have as well. Option 2 is still $2 million in a general fund deficit. So really would require 22 positions further above and beyond the 10 that we've already eliminating for this year. An additional 22 positions to bring that budget into a balanced position. And then option 3, I guess I just going to have to describe as pretty catastrophic at this point. At this point, we're already down 36 positions or 32 positions. So we calculate at least another 4 positions plus some pretty severe other salary measures to keep the city afloat with the bare basic essential services. Again, these budget estimates include water rate increases being delayed until September 1st, and our wastewater rate increases being delayed until January 1st. And it does include other revenue reductions in areas such as parking meters, business licenses, fingerprinting charges, recreation programs, building and sports field rentals, permit fees, et cetera. And we can, happy to go through the individual line items if you would like to. But in the previous budget study session, it seemed like the council had interest on focusing on the large 3 and developing an option that then staff can finalize an initial budget around. We've done a lot of research at this point in terms of, where comparable size cities throughout California are trending towards budget development. And I feel confident at this point that, somewhere in or near option 1 is a prudent first step for the city to take at this point with the data that we have available to us. But I will pause there and ask for questions.
Councilmember Watson first, please.
I don't have any questions at this time, but I'd like to thank Karen, Andrea, and the rest of our staff for the immense amount of work they've been putting into this since our last meeting. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Pereira?
No questions. I mean, would this be an appropriate time for me to share some initial thoughts? Sure. Okay. So yeah, I really appreciate how this has been, pulled together. I think it's also helpful for the public, I think, to get a sense of kind of the different paths that we can, that we're looking at. And I think for me, when I look at the options, it's helpful to see the HDL estimates and then the city staff estimates. And I think looking at this like 29% that the city has estimated for July 1st, if that was the magical date where things started to turn around, really fits also with HDL's estimate for October 1st, that percentage. And so for me, thinking about that percentage of 29 to 30% as the way to draft this initial budget, I think is a good way to go, because I think it lends itself to, we're working off very limited information. So it's either the city staff recommendation that's saying more urgently, we're going to see that 30% reduction, or HDL's estimation that we won't see that 30% reduction until closer to October 1st, that later timeline. So that for me would be the number that I think we should base an initial budget off of. And I then would ask that we, I know we've talked about that we would meet more regularly to check in about the budget, but then I think setting a time certain of when we would do basically a quarterly budget review to look at before October 1st where things are at, and be able to kind of determine from there if we need to reassess as we move into the following quarter. So those are some of my initial thoughts. Thank you.
Let's see, Vice Mayor Patino.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything Sophia said, and of course, thanks to the staff like Brett brought up. And I feel like the option one is probably a good place to start, and then in 60 to 90 days, we take a look at it again. So thanks.
Well, my thoughts are similar. I think that we need to set a date when we need to determine whether we're more on the path of option one in terms of revenues and in terms of effective sheltering in place continuing or ending. And if that looks like the path that we're on, then we should make reductions in staffing based on that. But if we see that it's significantly getting worse than option one, we need to have a tentative date when we can, which would be, as we've said, once a month, when we would see whether we're significantly off of the path for option one and need to switch to option two.
Just to clarify, one of Council Member Perez's comments, are you saying that for option two, you think it should be 29 to 30%?
No, I'm saying, because basically we're seeing two different estimations. So when we're talking about option one, I'm clarifying, let's go with that city estimate of that 29%, because that dovetails nicely with HDL's estimation for October 1st under option two. So I feel like that's a prudent number to go with for this first quarter. And if it turns out that HDL's estimation is the more accurate one, then we've already planned for that, and that has bought us some more time.
Cool, thank you for that. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And the variance between HDL's estimates and our own, to me, I just think that's something in the future we should take a look at as well. I feel like if it's the criteria we're giving them or whatever it is, I'd be really grateful if we could give a little more of a local specialized analysis from them that's, more catered than it already is to Arcata. But yeah, I'm, everything in the city column and all those projections, I'm 100% on board with. Yeah, thank you.
Well, we're finishing budget study right now, and so it looks like the next assessment that we would do would be likely the end of June, when we can see whether, as I said, whether we're following the path that we're predicting, if we're predicting option one, or whether we're diverging. And at that point, we can make an assessment as whether we need to make changes. But I think that option one is a good starting point as the budget that we are going to plan for and that we're predicting for the time being. But I very much appreciate the work that's gone into this, and that we at least know what we would need to do if we are more on the path of option two or option three, and that we don't have to rush it at the last minute to come up with it. That Director Starshevsky and City Manager Deemer have this in place and ready to go to a great extent with this in our hands. I mean, we all hope that the less favorable scenarios don't come to pass, but at least we're ready if we really need them.
Do you think that the end of June is soon enough, or too early, or too late? I'm looking at, we've got June, July, August, September. We have 4 months till that October time. I'm just thinking maybe the middle of July might be better, but I don't know. It seems like June's a little soon for us to be looking at it. End of June, that's 1 month from now. Maybe we should be looking at more like 45 days or longer. I don't know how the rest of you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I know I'd have to chew on it a little bit, but I mean, you definitely, that definitely can make sense to me.
Yeah, I would say having it be a little bit later would give us a little bit more time. And I think if I would say if staff felt like there was some clearer information to work off of that's sooner than that, then of course, well, let's not hold off. But yeah, I agree with you, Vice Mayor Patino, that I think buying ourselves a little bit more time to see how things, how they're trending, I think would be helpful.
So Sophia, are you thinking of the periods, that the assessment periods at each being 45 days, or are you just thinking the initial one would be 45 days from now, and then the subsequent ones would be, as we said previously, once a month after that? Which way are you thinking on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think 45 days from now makes sense. I mean, I think at every, once a month at our meetings, I think we should get a budget update. I don't think it precludes us from receiving an update. I think if we're talking about having a more in-depth conversation based on how trends are starting to appear, I think we need a little bit more time to have that sense. So I feel like, yeah, next month, mid-June, we could get an update at our council meeting saying, hey, this is where things are at. But I think to say a time certain of when we really want to reevaluate and go, now we have a better picture. I think buying ourselves a little bit more time, like Vice Mayor Patino, I think makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think either way, we're all going to be highly invested in what's happening with our budget. So I don't see this as sitting back and not taking any action and, just waiting a couple extra weeks. But I think we'll have, every week is different. So even adding a couple more weeks after this more in-depth review that we're doing probably will help give us a better picture than 30 days would. So that's my thought.
Okay.
I'll ask the finance director just to weigh in quickly. So I think what the mayor was probably referring to also was that we are going to bring you the entire budget document at your second meeting in June. So if we have any updated data that we can provide during the report of adopting your initial budget, I'll say for the 2021 fiscal year, we'll certainly add that into the staff report at that time as well. And then maybe we could outline in that staff report also those checkpoints for the year for you to review, kind of calendar out for the year and what that data might look like. And I'll see if the finance director has anything she'd like to add.
I can't hear currently. I've somehow muted, but I just did want to comment as well as providing council updates periodically. Just a reminder of how some of our tax revenues come in. We'll still see distributions throughout the summertime related to this current fiscal year all the way through the end of August. So just something to keep in mind with the monthly updates or however council sees fit for providing that information, that there's still going to be a little bit of a lag for, establishing some of the trend lines across the board tax-wise.
Right, Karen, were you planning, or Andrea, were you thinking of going fund by fund after this as it appeared in the budget itself? Because I think that would be helpful for the public to see how that breaks down. I mean, that I've read it in depth, but I think it would be especially helpful to the public and for us to all see it at one time. And then if we have questions at that time, or if the public has questions, that we can ask them and get answers from you and Karen.
Okay, I don't have a slide. I'm happy to walk through fund by fund, sort of those targets for this year. But the intent was to try to land on sort of a revenue option scenario and then to be able to provide that full budget picture around that scenario. So it was really clear to the community what programs would be in, what programs have been eliminated based on that initial budget scenario at your June 17th meeting. So either way, I could certainly give a recap.
I think what City Manager Deemer's saying, that makes sense to me. I'd be fine with giving her time to put that together.
Mm-hmm.
Me too. I'm good with that also. I think the high level, we pick a scenario and then we start working it out from there.
But what I can report on fund balance that I think is significant is with the option 1, 2, and 3 development, the finance director and I also went back and really ground truth each and every one of the revenues and expenditures that we have for the remainder of this fiscal year. And as the council knows, we immediately in March took several actions to reduce expenditures, whether it was in materials and supplies or major projects, the reduction of part-time staffing. We have not brought on a lot of our summer staffing, knowing that we probably weren't going to be able to retain them. So with all of those reductions that the city made, I would say the one little hopeful glimmer of light this week is that we have projected a balanced budget for the 1920 fiscal year, which I actually think is a really tremendous feat for the city of our size. And I would imagine we are one of very few cities in California that will not be dipping into reserves to balance this year's budget based on just having so many of our revenues drop immediately out from under us instantaneously. So we knew that we were taking those actions with an intent in mind, but be able to fully ground truth that with the data coming in was pretty relieving, I think, for both the finance director and I over the weekend. So that is the one good news for tonight. But I don't want to sugarcoat, the budget projection, even around alternative 1, is a really severe and dramatic decrease in service and the ability of the city to do a lot of the innovative things that we have been able to do in the past. So, but it does, I think, preserve core services. It preserves the ability of this city to rebound and to grow back as our economy grows, and it at least allows us to provide a solid base of support for the economic growth that our community is going to need our support to be able to help build and grow out of. So our businesses need us right now. And so to have that level of support to be able to assist them in regrowth is going to be critical. And I think the alternative 1 budget, as tight as it is, does provide that base.
I also wanted to throw out there, sorry, I didn't think about this earlier. I feel like I would be comfortable with at the least suspending the raises we gave ourselves, as well as, being flexible about our travel budget, if not eliminating our travel budget for the next fiscal year. I think, going 1 year, I think we would survive. But I just wanted to throw that out there if there's any support for that.
Brett, I asked Jeanette to talk to Nancy Diamond about our ability to make an adjustment to our wages based on state law. So, I'm not sure what we can do. And I was kind of waiting for Nancy to come back and say, this is what you can do, or you have to wait till November or whatever, before I was going to come out and make any kind of statement on that. So
okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I just don't know anything yet.
Well, if we can't rescind those increases, we obviously always, each of us have the option of making a donation to the city of that same amount if we choose to do so.
Sounds good to me. How about your travel budget? You want to let that go?
I think we've already lost our travel budget, if I understand correctly.
That's what I assumed.
Yes, and well, one advantage that we have, you can call it that, is that a lot of the meetings that we would be potentially going to in person, we can do virtually, and would not need, presumably would not need a travel budget for.
On Friday, I'm going to attend the virtual League of California Cities regional meeting. I think it was supposed to be in Crescent City or out of Fort Bragg, but it's virtual, so I'm not sure where it's going to be, sourced at. So there you go.
One thing I was concerned about, I guess, as far as rescinding the increases, is that if it is legal to do so, that I wouldn't want to lock out future councils from being able to receive the increase if the financial situation improves. And so that would be one advantage of each of us who chooses to do so, making a voluntary donation to the city.
Yeah, sure, as we're able to do. Thanks.
All right, next, Karen, have we received any public input for tonight's meeting?
There were no public comments submitted for this meeting.
Right, any further comments from council or questions from council on the budget?
I don't have any further questions or comments. Thank you.
No questions or comments.
No, thank you.
I don't have any further questions or comments. So are there any other further comments from staff at this time?
I don't think there's any other questions from staff at this time. We will build the detailed budget around option 1, and we will start to work on sort of a template for some of that financial data that will be updating monthly for the council to be able to track those trends. And then we'll have some discussion around how to close the gap. Right now, that's 653,000. And we'll have a recommendation for you in your finalized budget to do so.
Right, and next we will be going into closed session. So do we have any public comment on the closed session?
There is no public comment.
Right, so as I said, at this point in the meeting, City Council will adjourn to closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6 to conference with the city's labor negotiators. Due to the electronic nature of tonight's meeting, the city will post any action taken during the closed session on the front door of City Hall this evening, and will report out verbally any action taken during the June 3rd City Council meeting. So let us know when we are off the air.